Well, one of the attributes that comes to mind when I think of what a church planter looks like is flexible. And flexible, for sure. Especially if they're someone who wants to be engaged in church planting for a while. Flexibility could be, in regards to the day in and day out changes, cultural changes, the needs of the people. Surely, on a practical side, flexibility is a must-have by God's grace. I would also say, even on a larger scale as well, I think sometimes, those who pioneer new things, engage in new ministries, especially things like church planting, are visionary kind of leaders. And I think sometimes they can be really sold out to a particular vision or an idea that they believe is laid on their heart. And what happens when they discern or realize that God's vision, it has some subtle nuances that are different. So I think they come to a place where a choice must be made. Will I stay sold out to the vision itself, or am I really sold out to the vision giver? And in that case, in that type of a decision, I believe that they must have the flexibility and pliability to say, God, I'm going to submit to what your vision is, and so on a larger scale, flexibility as well. So both on the practical day in and day out, as well as on the big picture, God, am I going to be flexible in your hands? I think is a huge attribute.
I think about like a Swiss Army knife. It has all these little tools that, actually aren't really that useful on their own. There's definitely a better wine corker out there. There's definitely a better knife out there. But when you need all kinds of tools, this is actually a handy thing to have. And I think about a church planter being that way. Church planter might jump in on children's ministry curriculum, or might jump in on their guitar, or jump in on a sound system, and there's someone out there that's better for it. But the church planter has this ability to not be afraid to take on the task in front of them that no one else is stepping up to. And then the other thing that a church planter does is that they move from being that Swiss Army knife for the church, and instead they install leaders who are actually more capable and better than them. I recognize for myself that I'm comfortable jumping in doing all kinds of things. You ask me to sing, you ask me to preach, you ask me to do evangelism, you ask me to do whatever, I'm going to say, yeah, fine. But I also recognize about myself that I'm not the best at any of those things. There's always someone more capable than me.
I felt God asked me to write down something that came to mind, and it was, every day people die without Christ. And I took that note and I put it on the dash of my car. And so right by my speedometer, every time I would check my speed, I would see that note, and I would be reminded that every day people die without Jesus. As I would drive and I would ponder that concept that everyday people die without Christ, I started to ask myself, well, what are you willing to do, Bill? What are you willing to do to see people know Jesus? And, well, the Christian answer is share my faith, or share the gospel, or preach the gospel, or all of those types of things. But then I felt God kind of evolving that question that I was asking myself, and that being, Bill, what wouldn't you do? What risk wouldn't you take to see people know Jesus? What risk wouldn't you take for the opportunity to share the good news of the gospel? I would take a lot of risks to see someone know Jesus.
And realize that I'm not the type of person that likes to color inside of the lines. That's, after a while I kind of get a little bit unsettled and try to think, well, what are multiple angles and multiple ways to solve this same issue? So much like everybody else, when COVID hit, we, went back to the drawing board and started asking the questions like, hey, how do we remain on mission without changing the message, but how do we go about the methodology a little bit different? And after praying and fasting, we, connected with Micah and others and asked a lot of the hard questions, like, what does it take to be the church? What are our irreducible minimums? And we landed in this place where we said, worship, community, mission, and leadership development. We're really starting to see some really cool stuff happen as a result. So my thing would be, hey, lean in. If God's wired you differently, doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, right? Bounce things off of different people and see if maybe the Lord's not made you one of those tip of the spear type of people to break new ground so that others can come and follow in behind you.